Dark City. A full year before The Matrix made everyone question whether reality was real, this neo-noir already had an entire city full of people whose memories were rewritten every single midnight, and almost nobody saw it. New Line Cinema released it in February of 1998, directed by Alex Proyas, the same filmmaker who'd made The Crow. The budget sat at around $27 million, and it grossed roughly $27.2 million worldwide, never once climbing higher than number 4 domestically. The reason is brutal in its simplicity. It opened during Titanic's 17-week reign at number 1, and it got buried alive. The cruel part is how good it actually was. Roger Ebert named it the best film of 1998, and later added it to his great movies list. The premise is pure science fiction. A man wakes up with no memory in a perpetually nocturnal city controlled by the Strangers, pale beings who reshape the streets and rewrite human memories each night, all to study what makes a soul. They do it through a process called tuning, a psychokinetic ability that physically reconfigures the city's architecture while everyone sleeps. Decades later, it holds about a 78% critic score and a strong audience score, and it built a serious cult following on home video. A 2008 director's cut even removed the studio-imposed narration that spoiled the twist and restored 11 minutes of footage. Here's the kicker. Proyas has confirmed a Dark City series is in active development, with him reanalyzing the original to build a new story. This is the purest case of right film, wrong year. It predicted the reality-bending hook of The Matrix by a full 12 months, and lost the cultural moment to timing alone. A reboot built with modern world-bending visual effects, expanded into the series Proyas is already developing, could finally let this concept land at the scale it always deserved. Strange Days. James Cameron co-wrote a cyberpunk thriller about people getting addicted to recorded memories. Kathryn Bigelow directed it, and it made $8 million. Released in October of 1995, it was co-written by Cameron and Jay Cox, and it starred Ralph Fiennes as a former cop dealing in squid recordings, illegal clips that let a user experience another person's memories and raw senses directly. It's set on the eve of the year 2000, against a backdrop of racial tension boiling over in Los Angeles. The budget was around $42 million, and it grossed only about $8 million worldwide, a notorious commercial failure that stalled Bigelow's career for years. And yet, Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars within days of release. It's now widely regarded as a prescient cyberpunk landmark, one that anticipated body cam culture, viral recorded violence, and the whole idea of immersive media we now take for granted. That squid concept basically predicted a world of live-streamed first-person experience and viral phone footage of police violence decades early. A reboot would land in a culture that has finally caught up to its premise, and honestly, the talent pedigree alone, Cameron and Bigelow, makes this an obvious modern relaunch. Event Horizon. A rescue crew boards a missing ship that vanished into a black hole and came back, and what it brought back is the reason this became cosmic horror's most quoted cult film. It hit theaters in August of 1997, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. The setup is nightmare fuel. The salvage ship Lewis and Clark investigates the Event Horizon, a vessel that disappeared 7 years earlier using a gravity drive that folded space, and in doing so opened a gateway to a hellish dimension. The budget ran about $60 million, and it grossed roughly $26.7 million domestically, around $42 million worldwide, a clear disappointment. Part of the problem was the edit. Anderson was forced into a 6-week scramble so Paramount could release it before Titanic, cutting huge amounts of footage that was later lost or outright destroyed. Critics dismissed it on arrival, somewhere around a 36% score, but it slowly became a genuine touchstone of cosmic horror in science fiction. DVD sales got strong enough that Paramount asked Anderson to restore the deleted footage, only to discover it couldn't be found. This is the great what could have been of 90s sci-fi horror, gutted by a release date crunch. A reboot, or even a proper miniseries, could restore the longer, darker version audiences have wanted for decades, and lean fully into that gravity drive as portal to hell concept with modern effects. The Arrival. Charlie Sheen plays a radio astronomer who detects an alien signal and uncovers a secret invasion that's already terraforming Earth, and almost everyone missed it because of one much bigger movie. Released in May of 1996, it was written and directed by David Twohy, who'd later make Pitch Black. Sheen plays Zane Zeminski, a radio astronomer who intercepts an alien transmission and slowly realizes that aliens are secretly accelerating global warming to make the planet habitable for themselves. The budget was about $25 million, and it grossed roughly $14 million domestically, buried under the marketing blitz for Independence Day, which opened just over a month later. The aliens were created digitally by Pacific Data Images with a memorable backward-jointed design, and the film holds around a 66% score, praised for its paranoid, conspiracy-driven take on First Contact. That core premise, hostile aliens deliberately engineering climate change to terraform the world, reads as eerily on the nose for a modern audience that lives with climate anxiety every day. A reboot could turn its paranoid First Contact idea into a genuinely timely conspiracy thriller. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I make videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would really help the channel out. Thanks. Soldier. Kurt Russell speaks barely 100 words across the entire film, and the whole thing is secretly set in the same universe as Blade Runner. Warner Brothers released it in October of 1998, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson and written by David Webb Peoples. And that's the secret weapon, because Peoples co-wrote Blade Runner, and Anderson openly considers Soldier a sidequel set in the same universe. The evidence is right there on screen. A spinner from Blade Runner sits in the junk planet wreckage, and Russell's character is shown to have fought at the shoulder of Orion and the Tannhauser Gate, the exact battles referenced in Roy Batty's dying monologue. Russell plays Todd, a soldier bred and trained from birth, then discarded as obsolete and left for dead on a garbage planet. The budget was about $60 million, and it grossed only about $14.6 million worldwide, a major financial failure that later found its cult. Russell trained intensely to deliver a near-silent, purely physical performance. A canonical Blade Runner sidequel hiding inside a forgotten flop is exactly the kind of franchise hook studios chase now. With Blade Runner back in the cultural conversation, a reboot could openly position itself inside that universe. Screamers. Before the self-aware machines of the Terminator became a cliché, this Philip K. Dick adaptation had weapons that learned to evolve entirely on their own. Released in January of 1996, directed by Christian Duguay and starring Peter Weller, it's based on Philip K. Dick's 1953 short story, Second Variety, with a screenplay by Alien co-writer Dan O'Bannon. It's set on a mining world where autonomous, self-replicating weapons, the Screamers, evolve into forms that mimic humans. It grossed roughly $7 million worldwide against a $14 million budget and sits around a 29% score, but it's held a steady cult following ever since. A genuine Philip K. Dick property about self-evolving AI weapons is prime reboot material in an era obsessed with autonomous machines. And the source story is honestly stronger than the 90s execution ever managed. The 13th Floor. The same year The Matrix ate the entire world, another film about discovering your reality as a simulation came out, and it never stood a chance. Released in May of 1999, it was directed by Joseph Rusnak and produced by Roland Emmerich's Centropolis Entertainment, loosely based on Daniel Galoui's 1964 novel Simulacron 3. The premise is sharp. Researchers build a fully simulated 1937 Los Angeles, populated by sentient programs who have no idea they're software, and then they begin to suspect their own world might be a simulation too. The budget was about $16 million, and it grossed roughly $18.6 million worldwide, around $12 million of that domestic. It opened less than 2 months after The Matrix, and got overshadowed almost completely, landing around a 29% score, though it's been reappraised since as a smarter, quieter simulation story. Nested simulation stories are everywhere now, but this one got there first, with a period noir twist nobody else was doing. A reboot could foreground that recursive reality idea modern audiences crave, without the Matrix comparison hanging over its head. Cube. 7 strangers wake up trapped in a maze of identical cube-shaped rooms, half of them rigged to kill, and the whole thing was shot on one single set. Released in 1997, this Canadian film was directed and co-written by Vincenzo Natali in his feature debut. It was made for a tiny budget, reported somewhere between about $250,000 and $350,000, using a single redressed cube set over and over. It won Best Canadian First Feature at the 1997 Toronto International Film Festival, then spawned multiple sequels and a Japanese remake, and it's widely cited as a high-concept cult classic. That pure puzzle box premise is endlessly remakeable and brutally cheap to produce, which is exactly why a slick, big-budget reimagining keeps getting floated. Virtuosity. Denzel Washington hunts a virtual reality serial killer built from the personalities of around 200 murderers, played by a young Russell Crowe before anyone knew his name. Released in August of 1995, directed by Brett Leonard, it has Crowe playing Sid 6.7, a sentient VR construct composited from multiple serial killer personalities who escapes into the physical world. The budget was about $30 million, and it grossed roughly $37 million worldwide, underwhelming for the era and for 2 stars of that caliber. Washington has since admitted it was largely a paycheck role, but the idea endures. A digital being trained on the worst of humanity, then escaping into reality, is a perfect premise for the AI age, and the 2 megastar pairing keeps the property recognizable enough to relaunch. Fortress. In a future where having a second child is a crime, Christopher Lambert gets locked inside an underground prison run entirely by an AI warden. Released in 1992, directed by Stuart Gordon and shot in Queensland, Australia, the setup is grim. In a future with a strict one-child policy, a couple is imprisoned in a 33-level subterranean private prison controlled by a computer system called Z10. Inmates are fitted with intestinal devices that deliver punishment for any rule breaking. It earned a modest domestic gross of around $6 million, but became a large overseas hit, pulling in roughly $48 million internationally. A privatized, AI-run mega-prison sitting on top of a population-controlled dystopia hits a lot harder now than it did in 1992, and the concept is frankly bigger than the original's budget ever allowed. Hardware. A scavenged robot head reassembles itself into a self-repairing military killing machine in a post-apocalyptic punk film featuring cameos from Iggy Pop and Lemmy. Released in 1990, this British film was written and directed by Richard Stanley in his feature debut, starring Dylan McDermott and Stacey Travis. In a radioactive wasteland, a salvaged robot head turns out to be a Mark 13, a prototype self-repairing military android that reactivates and goes on a rampage inside a sealed apartment. It features cameos from musicians Iggy Pop and Lemmy of Motorhead, plus Carl McCoy of Fields of the Nephilim. Critics described it as a lower-budget, more deliberately punk take on the Terminator, and it became a certifiable cult classic, with Stanley building the whole thing around themes of fascism and authoritarian overreach drawn from his own experiences. A self-repairing, autonomous war machine is a more relevant nightmare now than ever, and Stanley's grimy, design-forward aesthetic is exactly the kind of distinctive visual identity a reboot could amplify. Sphere. A team descends to the ocean floor to study an alien spacecraft and finds a perfect golden sphere that grants whoever enters it the power to make their thoughts real. And the film that resulted was unfinished when it hit theaters. Warner Brothers released it in February of 1998, directed by Barry Levinson and based on Michael Crichton's novel. It stars Dustin Hoffman, Sharon Stone, and Samuel L. Jackson as scientists investigating a craft on the seabed and the mysterious sphere hidden inside it. The sphere gives those who enter the ability to manifest their subconscious thoughts into reality, which very quickly turns deadly. The budget was reported in the $73 to $80 million range, and it grossed roughly $73 million worldwide, a financial failure. Both Levinson and Hoffman have since said the film was essentially unfinished, hurt by late reshoots and rushed visual effects. The Crichton source novel is far tighter than the rushed film, which is the classic case for a faithful reboot. That thoughts become real premise is a strong, psychological sci-fi hook the original never fully delivered on. eXistenZ. David Cronenberg made a film about a virtual reality game so immersive you can't tell when you've actually left it, and it had the misfortune of opening the same month as The Matrix. Released in April of 1999, written and directed by Cronenberg and starring Jude Law and Jennifer Jason Leigh, the premise is unsettling. A game designer and a security trainee plug into eXistenZ, a biological virtual reality game played through organic pods that connect to the spine through a bioport, and reality and game become impossible to tell apart. Those game pods are living, fleshy organisms, classic Cronenberg body horror fused directly with gaming culture. The budget was about $15 million, and it grossed only about $2.9 million in the United States and Canada, a commercial failure. Put it in perspective, it made less in its entire domestic run than The Matrix earned on its single biggest day, and yet it holds around a 76% critic score and a 68 Metacritic score, with Roger Ebert giving it 3 stars out of 4. It's now regarded as eerily prescient about immersive gaming, virtual identity, and the question of which layer of reality is even the real one. That's exactly why it's the strongest note to end on. Its central idea, an embodied, biological VR you simply can't escape, has only grown more relevant as immersive gaming, VR headsets, and questions about digital reality dominate the culture. A Cronenberg-style reboot wouldn't feel like nostalgia, it would feel like a warning that finally arrived on time. If this was worth your time, consider subscribing to keep up with all the future uploads. Thanks for watching.